Okay, where's my?
Yeah, because you wrote some stuff for it.
I did. It's right over here. It's not much. I didn't have as much time as I wanted to, and I stumped myself almost immediately, which
Well,
is no surprise.
the point is to play with the ideas, like because I know I have just the like the two major things with it. So
It's actually a nice little story. So it's about like a little less than a page, a notebook page, and it's a discourse that I was writing. And I know you do that more often, right? You just write yourself a conversation. Like who did that? Was that Plato? Is that
but that's how
Platonian?
Plato used Socrates. He would take the concept of Socrates and make it battle other people to like. That's why it's called the dialogues and all that. So yeah,
Right.
Plato was the one that was most famous for using that
Sure.
to show dialectics in a written form.
Okay. So that's essentially kind of what I was doing because it starts. Should I just read this? Like, see what we think?
Why not? We got
'Cause
time.
I started with the question, what does it mean to be happy? Defining happiness itself is kind of a tough one. It's
Mhm.
a little too tough. It's a little too broad. Because is it just like a state of being where everything is great? Like you're just chemically balanced and nothing phases you? Like,
Right. Yeah, that's the trouble. Even with the question that you wrote, is that it has the same problem. Like, what does it mean to be happy? Well, it's going to fundamentally be based on what happiness is.
exactly.
But I feel like it falls into one of two categories that both. God, I like the English language for so many reasons, but there's a couple words that just th- they have too much going on. Love is one of the big ones that
Mhm.
just uh, it means too much, ends up meaning almost nothing. Then
Right.
happiness is close. So the dichotomy I tend to see with happiness is um, so like I've seen things with like the advice where it's like, choose to be happy, right? So it's this concept that no matter what the situation is, you can choose to see the good in it, like, or not even the good in it, but like choose a good outlook on it. So happiness is almost related more to, I don't know if an optimistic disposition is the right way to put it, but that it's the stoic element of like it is what it is, and I choose to like not make it negative. So that's happiness, is not being negative. It's the absence of negative is happiness, and that kind of definition, which doesn't feel like the term happiness, but it's a more practical definition because
Mhm.
it's more closer to content. And then the other
Right.
happiness is the like neurological neurochemical high of like, yeah, I'm
Elation.
happy.
Yeah.
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 And that is unsustainable because it's a high. Like that's the whole point.
Precisely. Yeah. And the whole choosing to be happy thing, I kind of roll my eyes at that once in a while because that has its own like toxicity to it. That's a poison you can drink too much of.
Mhm.
Because sometimes you should not be happy.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I think
yeah.
that's the thing about happiness is that if you categorize it as an emotion, I think that's the thing is there's happiness as an emotion and happiness as a concept.
Mhm.
As an emotion, it needs to be treated like every other emotion, which
It's
is
not
very
all the time. Yeah.
yeah, there's a time and a place for it. You can have too much of it, you can have too little of it, you can mismanage it.
Right. In fact, if you do have too much of it, it's probably there's probably a disorder named for that. There might not be though. I don't know.
Well,
That's a good question. You're welcome.
ironically, people with clinical depression tend to be happier, right? Like that's why they go unnoticed. It's not that they have a true content, right? They don't have the other thing that like satisfied contentment, but when they're just in their day-to-day lives, like they're happy to be there. They're happy to be doing things, even if they don't feel that. Um, or there's the thing where people chase happiness,
Yeah.
um, which in that case, it's usually closer to like the dopamine thing, right? Where it's like they're chasing the high, they're chasing that sensation. Um,
Mhm.
and in which case, then it's a dopamine thing, right? They're an addict to a state of being.
Oh yeah. Yep. And then They do everything they can to grasp that and to keep it and hold
Mhm.
it, and they'll usually strangle it to death. Or they will turn into some sort of ADHD-esque nightmare of like constantly chasing the dopamine and not having any like grounding, any base, any home base to land on,
Mhm.
because you're just constantly trying to find like keep whatever happiness you can. And so you jump relationships, you jump, hobbies. You like have no identity, no core identity
Mhm.
based that way. It's a
Yeah.
tough one. So yeah, because that's kind of what I ran into. Because the answer that I gave to that, so I did the way I like to think about things and parse it out this way is I'll ask kind of just a general question like that. What does it mean to be happy? And I'll answer it as honestly as I can. And then I try to attack it. And then I only ask questions of myself. I'll ask a question and I'll answer it. And I'll ask a question based off of the answer I just gave. And I
Mhm.
keep trying to like, yeah. So that's very Socratic. I mean, Socrates is
Yep.
known for that.
Mhm.
So I do it. I use the Socratic method uh, of discourse. And I ran out of time because it was before work, before the band work. So I had to go do that. But actually, it was kind of funny because something happened. I actually circled the time that it happened too, because yeah. So I got in there around like 3:50, 4 o'clock, and had time to myself. So I just started writing, and I essentially answered, happiness is the freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. And then I immediately jumped into what's stopping you from doing that now. Like
Mhm.
as if, yeah, right. And then I dive into that. It's your past choices, my past choices, are stopping me from doing what I want to do now when I want to do it. Because you have to live with the consequences of choices you made in the past, which alter the timeline,
Yeah.
of what you're doing. Uh, so it's all of these things around what makes you happy rather than like, this is happiness.
Hmm.
So it's like setting up the environment essentially to allow for the best opportunities at it is how I started to answer that. And then I kind of stumped myself because you can like, it just starts to dissipate into a million different categories and questions. Because I did that, and then I start asking, but you were able to choose your own path despite the outcome of your choices. You did what you wanted when you wanted to, yet you are unhappy. Your previous definition is therefore defunct. So I start to like,
Mhm.
so I ask again, what does it mean to be happy? And then I answer, accepting the burden of your choices. And then I start to actually like go into, oh, wait, that doesn't mean you're happy.
But see, does it though, right? Because like the concept of a stoic happiness is that contentment, right? Where it's like
Right.
you could be uh happy and sad, right? Like in the content sense, where it's like, yeah, I'm sad, but like I'm glad to be sad, right? So maybe glad's like a better word. Um,
Yeah.
because you run into that trouble a lot with especially the rise in postmodernism, but even in the modernist concepts of the individual, you run into the trouble. It's like, okay, it's about the individual being happy, but there's being happy in a moment is different than being like internally happy.
Mhm.
So it's the difference between something causing happiness, or this is where we're back to like the choose to be happy things. Like it's a terrible thing to say when there's no context for it, but it's more the truth, right? That like you have to choose to be happy. It's regardless of what's happening, you have to like be grateful for what you do have, and if you learn to see joy or some kind of pleasure or even just an acceptance of the good of things like challenges and obstacles, um, that's going to be healthier. Um,
Mhm.
so if you get more where I was going to probably end up going with this when we were talking about it leading up to this is that the concept of happiness probably ultimately does more harm than good. That people would just be better off if they weren't concerned about being happy, which to the modernist and definitely the postmodern, individualist, it's like, well, you're saying don't no one should be happy and stuff like that. It's like, no, it's not a concern. Your
Right.
happiness is not a concern because
Well,
it's
yeah, happiness is an outcome, not an activity.
mhm. And I don't know, it's even an outcome. It's a fiction, right? That's what makes it a problem. It's not real. You can never be happy. Like the romantic idea of happy just isn't a thing outside of a high. Um, but it's not a truth. It's not a fundamental thing. Like contentment is. Uh, but if you told somebody like, you know, learn to just be content, they typically don't associate with happiness, partly because of what you said, is they see happiness as dealing with more freedom. And to be content, you have to it's the discipline equals freedom thing, right? So like to be
Yeah.
content, you have to choose to like, I don't know if I'd say give up freedoms, but to use your freedom to restrict yourself so that the
Yeah,
freedoms that aren't restricted are greater.
exactly. It's Mark Manson's thing. You have to choose which fucks to give.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, yeah, because you can't give a fuck about everything.
Mhm.
That'll destroy you.
Well, and if you give a fuck about being happy, you're fucked. That would be the way to like summarize that. If being happy is a concern, you're going to be unhappy most of the time because
Yes.
not only are you not happy, you're unhappy about being unhappy.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And that's kind of what I started to find out for myself. It's talked about throughout history. Simply preserve what is it simply like persevering and achieving goals and like just constantly grinding doing that doesn't guarantee happiness, and that's been talked about every self-help book, whether it's good or bad, have kind of said that.
Mhm.
uh, and then it's funny because I was writing and a sentence cuts off, and then I have a new, you can kind of, I don't know if you can see it, but I have a paragraph of stuff, and then I cut off, and then a little couple sentences under that, and I circled it. It's 4:31 p.m. A student just gave me a cookie he made. My first reaction was resistance due to my inner conflicts regarding body image and like, oh, I shouldn't have sugar right now, blah, blah, blah. Followed immediately by gratitude. A student just gave me a cookie he made at home. Starting to think gratitude is linked more with happiness than anything else.
Mhm. Yeah, I would say that's what's missing. I would say is when people talk about, yeah, anybody would be happier if they, instead of focusing on happiness, focused on being grateful for anything. If they focus on the concept of gratitude, they would find more of the happiness that they were looking for.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that is in most peace loving scriptures of, Buddhism is really big on that. Christianity talks about it. Yes. Although I don't know, the Christian stuff gets misconstrued because gratitude is a huge part of Christianity. Um, I'm speaking mainly from a Catholic lens, since that's the one that I know and grew up in
Mhm.
the most. But overall, I think it's pretty safe to say gratitude is a very large part of the Christian, ethos. Uh, but it's specifically kind of geared gratitude towards Christ.
Yeah, yeah. He died for you.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's and that's where the guilt aspect, like there's the kind
Mhm.
of joke of Catholic guilt, and that's where that comes from. Of like, you should be grateful and you're not, so you feel guilty.
Mhm.
You're a sinner, and he fixed that, and you're not like grateful enough. So they talk about gratitude, but it's a pedal for how the it's like a bar that they've set too high on purpose.
Yeah, and
And so
it's it's funny because in that tradition, right? Like in more the traditional Judaic concept of gratitude is uh well, I mean, if you read the stories, right, like they're grateful for being punished on top of the blessings, right? It's not just, oh, we're grateful that God gave us these
right,
blessings. It's also we're grateful that he cares enough to punish us, right? So it's not
right,
it's the gratitude is pervading their concept, at least in some of them. But again, a more traditional approach is that, well, it's all God's work, so all of it you should be grateful for, the happiness, the misery, the whatever. It's yeah, it's more Buddhist in that way, right? It's more well, there's got to be a better term for the like. Well, there's the concept of theosophical, but I don't. That was a loaded word. But the core religious stream that comes down from the ancient times through all the major religions. That kind of gratitude is at the core. That it's like all of
That's a
creation.
dogma. Another Buddhist thing. That's a dogma.
Yeah, but all of creation is something to be grateful for, and that's where you find peace.
Yeah.
Is the acceptance of it, and the happiness you seek isn't wanting something out of the world, it's accepting the world.
Yeah, no, it's true. And then it's also where we find unhappiness, because we usually, when we see the scale of things, like time is a big one. I think about time a lot. How different periods of history, like humans are barely registered on a time scale as far as how long the universe has been around, how long Earth has been around, how long Earth has even had sustainable life. Humans are next to nothing on that scale, and yet everything we know, it's the pale blue dot like scenario. Everything you've ever known, every war, every crime, every miracle has happened on this pale blue dot suspended in a sunbeam floating in space. That kind of thing. Like that kind of scale either gives people peace or it terrifies them a lot.
I've come to more the conclusion after years of the like, well, the world had more philosophy type thing. Actually, it's because I saw a meme. It was a picture of a happy couple like walking down the road, and behind them you see a bus coming down the road going through water, and it's going to splash them. So it's like people trying everything they can to like maintain their sanity, and then it's philosophers coming to like ruin their day. Because I don't.
No, it's true.
As a philosopher, it helps to know the truth because that's what you're trying to do. For the average person, that level of scale is just an existential crisis waiting to happen, because it debases your ability to find meaning.
Right.
Regardless.
That's why I'm just reading about this in Sapiens right now. Actually, we're on that part of it's the scientific revolution essentially, and since like science is not a great substitute. Well, okay, science can be a substitute for religion, but it's different in that religion is about kind of absolutes, like this is, and science is about acknowledging that we might be wrong about something, and we have to shift if we find out we are wrong.
Yeah.
So where people, and we all crave, like, we want to know. We all just do. We want to know. Because it makes us, like, even biologically, like evolutionarily, we just want to feel safe. So being certain is a feeling of safety.
Well, and outside of the concept that the material world is hell, right? The clear evidence of behavior to effect in the material world is that people that are very certain, regardless of the validity of their certainty, do better. They tend to be happier, they tend to be more successful, they tend to be better in social situations. So certainty has its own merit in the material world. It's somehow built into it, this like having real belief seems to be a huge benefit. And it's unfortunate that both science and philosophy have to, that's the curse, right, of a true scientist or true philosophers. You give up that to find the truth.
You do, because the truth, like, I love the phrase that if it can be destroyed by the truth, it deserves to be destroyed by the truth. But the truth isn't always flattering. It rarely is, actually. It's very rarely is the truth like good news necessarily. You can turn it, and actually that steers us back into our topic of the truth is rarely like just good news. but you can turn it into good news. It's how you receive it and then apply it that
Mhm.
then you
Do you have
can,
an
you know,
example?
uh, let's see. I mean, there's plenty abound.
Well, let's just use the scale example, right? So the truth
Sure.
is we're atomically small compared to the
Yeah.
scale of the universe.
Yeah.
We use the term universe, and by and large, humans uh, mentally say universe and picture a galaxy, because to picture how many galaxies there are is beyond
Yeah.
whatever. It's why I hate
It's
when
like us
people are like
it's like us talking,
intergalactic.
I wish million and billion were not just one letter apart because two vastly different sums. But
Mhm.
anyways, yeah.
But so like that example, so it's what, so it's the news of that, right? So the bad news is that in the grand scale, you're so infinitesimally small that to think in any regard you really have any major impact on the whole thing doesn't make any sense. Uh,
Mhm.
People have the spiritual beliefs. There's the butterfly effect, which I think is a bigger case for the significance, but it still stands by the fact that you're infinitesimally small. Um,
Yeah.
so all the things that seem big to you, then this is where you get this type of nihilistic thing. It's like it doesn't matter. That's bad news, because if it doesn't matter, then now what? That's always the nihilistic
Yeah.
catastrophe.
No, it's true. The other thing I'm thinking of with this conversation is the poem Osmandius. You know that one?
I know the name of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, it's like a person exploring the desert discovers like the base of a broken statue, and this poem, this quote unquote poem, is written on. I am on Osmandius, king of kings, blah blah blah. It's like no one's ever heard of this pharaoh, essentially.
Yeah.
But at the time he was the super holy shit, awesomest, most long lived thing in the world, and he will
Mhm.
never be forgotten. No one knows. There's
Mhm.
just some writing on a stone somewhere in the desert that says this.
But if everybody functioned under that understanding, right, without whatever this good news is, right? If it's just the bad news, it's like, well, then why do anything? Like,
Yeah, most
other
people
than,
stop there.
yeah, or it's like, or seek, avoid pain, seek pleasure, which is that's a whole thing. Maybe we can bridge that in because the pleasure links to the happiness thing, maybe. Um, but I don't know. It's the I don't see personally good news with that outside of having a robust philosophical structure to take that hit.
But you need something to guide you.
Mhm. Yeah, because
Because
if you
yeah, as
just,
soon as you realize that nothing matters, you're just kind of in the void and you're
yeah,
just floating.
it's the philosophy used to be a lot treated a lot more dangerously, right? Like it was the concept was it was dangerous to talk to regular people about it. It was dangerous to teach people about it. Uh,
Mhm.
it was a dangerous thing and it was treated as such. And now with the age of information, it's all pretty just out there. Because yeah, there's warnings on all any philosophy that touches esotericism or occultism warns like you could just go insane. Like if you start working through the metaphysics and the logic and like just playing with the ideas, that's it. This isn't about fucking
Mhm.
opening portals to demons. Just the ideas themselves are so dangerous to the human psyche that you could stumble on a truth, but you didn't have the system ready to like handle that, and it just crushes you.
Yeah. We're almost getting into like Lovecraftian horror, right? We
Mhm.
we know something and we can do nothing with that information.
Yeah. But so yeah, but back to it, like, okay, how do you so I mean it just the concept of the infinitesimally small to the infinitesimally massive justifies the happiness chasing lifestyle, right? Like, well, if none of it matters, then just chase the high. And like if you're miserable when you're miserable, whatever. Um,
Right.
just get it while the getting's good. Like,
Right. Right. Which I mean, a lot of people would also call that capitalism. It's not. It's not capitalism, but a lot of
mm,
people associate that with capitalism and greed and not heathen, but
hedonism gets a bad name because people misunderstand hedonism all the time.
right, yeah, because they think it's just they just want to fuck. Like,
Yeah, because they misunderstand the term pleasure the same way people misunderstand the word happiness.
right.
It's like, oh, do what's pleasurable, and it's like, well, it's not what's pleasurable to the body; it's what's pleasurable to the soul. So a
Mhm.
hedonist is somebody who find like a hedonist is somebody who has fucked off from the society and just goes and meditates and eats healthy. Like that's a hedonist, not the like
Right.
party animals. It's
No, those there's a name for folks who just kind of dive into the actual physical pleasures of life.
Mhm.
I don't remember what it is,
Anyway.
but we all know the type. We all know the type. Like, and we all dip into that once in a while because we're human. Like, we are still biological mammal creatures that, that physical pleasure is built in. Uh, but so many people, seek that and are not happy. Like it's actively talked about all the time about, we have everything and I can do anything and I'm still not happy.
Mhm.
And it's just one of those things. Viktor Frankl talks about that, and he's gone through some shit. He's been very unhappy.
Mhm.
He was very unhappy in his, especially in his later years. Um, but his whole thing is having a purpose is what sustains you. I don't know if he necessarily talked too much about happiness because he was talking about having a purpose will help you survive in any circumstance. Nazi
What
death camps included in that.
a man who has a why can bear any how. Is
That's
that?
essentially what Frankl was talking about. That might even be his words. I don't remember.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
not. Yeah,
I
that
mean,
is his. It's yeah that like that sentiment.
right. So happiness might be one of those words. I highly recommend you read The Art of Zen and Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yeah, that keeps getting recommended to me.
Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. That's what it is. Um, because kind of the main topic of the book, I won't spoil it, but the main the main kind of topic of the book is his whole thing is the obsession with the word quality and what that means. Because
Mhm.
how can you actually describe? And what he did when he kind of first, like, the light bulb kind of, that Satori moment, the light bulb kind of clicked on, uh, was he grabbed all, he was a philosophy teacher and he grabbed all his like different books and he opened the Tao Te Ching, the Taoist text of the way that can be named, not the eternal way, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, and he replaced all of he opened the Bible, he opened all these things. He replaced all of the like, this is the thing terms with the word quality, and it kind of just slots right in. You know, the
Hmm.
quality that can be talked about is not real quality, like that kind of thing. Or, uh, in the beginning,
Oh, where is it?
quality was created and it was good. That kind of stuff.
Hold
Like
on.
he would do that. And happiness might be one of those types of words.
Hold
Ooh,
on.
we're searching. We're
Yeah,
searching.
because
There's a red string somewhere in this.
so the Little Prince. And now here's my secret, a very simple secret. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is invisible to the eye.
That's just it. Yeah. And that's a very like sacred statement,
Mhm.
essentially.
Yeah.
Because it's true. We are not able, like science basically has shown us, we are not able to see everything in the universe. We're not able to hear. Our color spectrum that our eyes can perceive is very limited. Our sound spectrum that our ears can perceive is very. We are souls trapped inside of meat mechs. Like,
Mhm.
we can only absorb so much. So it would not surprise us that there would be more that we simply can't explain with the, like, our brain is literally inside of a encapsulated like
You're about to
cage.
start showing me your crystals and talk about these vibrations.
No, see, I've gone down that route. I'm a
Me
musician,
too.
right? So I've gone down the vibration route. um and there's, it's an interesting thought experiment, if nothing else.
Mhm.
But it is one of those things of, and I could talk about the philosophy of music all day. That's that's a passion of mine.
Mhm.
But like, there are just things that we feel, we know we feel. Like I joke about at our job, right? Customers will call us, and the joke is like they're angry, or they need something, and they know that they want, but they don't know what they want.
Or how to communicate it.
Exactly. And it's just that's a pretty common situation that we find ourselves in. And happiness is exactly one of those. We know we want it, but we don't know exactly what it is.
But see, if we take the like ancient philosophical route, happiness in every sense really is peace. And
Yep.
not like, and this is not to be confused with peace as an opposite to violence. Peace is a standalone, right? It's the same concept that there isn't an opposite to true good, because there
Mhm.
can't be. It's all pervading. Uh,
Yeah.
so it's similarly, like, it's, the warrior's peace is like, he's out to war. He doesn't disturb his peace to kill somebody. He's like, I've accepted, like, you're a warrior, I'm a warrior, we're battling now, and I can go
Right.
home and I sleep like a fucking baby. Like
Yeah. No, it's true.
and that
It's true.
peace is, and this is where you can make a rail against capitalism, because it definitely is guilty of this. So it's that peace, but that peace is hard to attain and people just don't talk about it. But also politics, religion, merchants, like from capitalism to every other situation, and any form of power uh, that needs a population to work, wants
Mhm.
to disturb the peace of the people.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's how you incentivize them to chase the happiness, outside of
Mhm.
themselves.
No, it's true. And that, yeah, and that kind of bears to mind, like, if people were more or less happy, we'll just call it happy. If people were happy, we might honestly not be very technologically advanced. Because I'm not saying it makes you lazy, but the it's the disgruntled that cause change. In some ways, let me say that, because there's
Yeah,
the other part where if there's the freedom, if you have the freedom to explore and experiment and do those kinds of things, because usually it's either you have a problem to solve and you're disgruntled and need to do something about it, or you are curious, and curiosity, I think, is the true driver of change. But the other part is problem solving.
yeah.
Those two they're not always
But
compatible.
I think you could probably do it where it's like the opposite of peace is chaos, and more creative.
It's true. No, the opposite of violence is creation, like making.
I don't know
Because
if that's the opposite of violence. The opposite of violence is passive.
that's the opposite of violent.
Well, yeah, but because like you can, you know, I can create a catapult that shoots, cow manure into your castle. Like that's a pretty creative way to enact
That
violence. And
has
yeah,
been
I guess
done.
I don't know if passive is the right word against violence either. That one's a tricky one. But sticking to the happiness thing, we can cover violence in another video.
That's a
Um,
big topic. Yep.
yeah, I do think that there's legitimacy too, because it's the legitimacy to the concept that the happiness stunts creation, because creation happens more in a chaotic space. So the more chaos there is, the more creation. Chaos is the creative element.
Right.
The more stable something is, the less it moves, the less it changes.
Hmm.
It's also my trouble with yogis. Like I'm into the peace thing. I think there's a way to balance them, but I feel like that's the mystery of the ages. So I don't
Right.
feel like I have a solution to that, but it seems to me there has to be a way to balance those two forces.
Oh
But yeah,
yeah.
switch up with the yogis, where it's like, yeah, just fuck off from society and starve yourself and hum all day, and you'll be happy, you'll have peace. It's like, okay, but that the person in the city can't do that, and it's like, okay, well, there shouldn't be cities. It's like, well, there's going to be cities. You can't.
Yeah. That's not. Yeah. No, we are we cities are a natural progression of how we operate. Like,
So how do you find the peace in the chaos?
right. No. And that's like a typical like this is some like villain shit too of like they're trying to create, it's not even villain, it's like the anti-hero type of stuff of like,
Mhm,
well, if everyone were mind controlled, this would achieve world peace.
mhm,
Like
yeah,
that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, you're not wrong.
wrong.
Right.
You're technically correct. The best
Right.
kind of correct.
Exactly. Like, sure, if I lobotomize everybody, then they're probably not going to do much,
Mhm.
and world peace will be achieved. Uh, but
But I'd
that's
like
not
to have us
real.
play with this idea of quality, um, because
Yeah,
I'm familiar with similar things, but not that example you gave. Because I
yeah,
don't know, I feel like if you focus that concept of quality is integral to the concept of gratitude. I think that those two concepts like
that's
touch.
true. Something with good quality provides you with contentment, essentially.
Mhm,
Like a good, even the mundane stuff of a quality car is something you don't have to worry about. It takes you from A to B. It works well. You know it's going to turn on when you turn the key. Like quality car,
mhm,
like a quality suit. It looks good. It fits well. It's made of dense or durable material, like a quality suit. That kind of stuff.
mhm.
A quality person is reliable. Like it's stuff that makes us feel safe, essentially. Like in a
But I
in
don't
a
know if it's
broad
just that
sense.
because there's like the aesthetic quality, right? There's a more artistic quality that can also play because it plays more into like the same thing with like the music, right? Like there's
Mhm.
this quality that can be added to things that just like tingles us.
Yeah,
Because like I got a new iPhone partly to like do better for these videos. But they created the standard for how a phone, like a smartphone, comes out of a box. They created that
yeah,
as an experience where you pull it and it like suctions out and then pops, and then the phone is just there. Like, and I worked for Apple, and like people like just do it and they don't think much of it, but it's a really cool way to get a device because it's just there. Bah, it presents
yeah.
itself to you like a piece of jewelry. Um,
Did
and I was like,
you read the Jobs biography by Walter Isaacson?
no.
Okay, because that it's a good biography. He's a really good biographer. But the essential element that I took away is Jobs specifically. Love him or hate him, because he's a divisive person. But love him or hate him, he was obsessed with providing quality.
Mhm.
Absolutely obsessed in every way. Everything needs to be as good as it can possibly be for a purpose.
Yeah, but that's my point when you're talking about like just the durability. It's not just that. There's these other little things. Like in customer service jobs, it's something that if I had more, leadership, and if I had more skill in leadership, I would instill this into people I worked with. Um, but it's the little things. It's you know how you how do you bag something? How do you and like in higher end companies all have you ring up a customer this way, you give them the bag this way, like all those little details. And most people don't. If this is the thing is, I think it's a tied to gratitude because if you look for quality, you notice those things. But even if
Mhm.
you don't look for quality, part of you knows, like feels it. So it's important to do, regardless if you're somebody who really appreciates what's happening.
It's true. At the very least, you notice when it's not there.
Yeah, I'd say that'd be a good point.
Right. And that's the yin yang, the Taoist concept of, a thing only exists when you can know that when a thing only exists when you know it doesn't exist at the same time. Like,
Mhm.
yeah,
It has to fill a
what,
space.
yeah, I did not explain that very well, but you kind of get the idea of like, you know when it's there. You might not know when it's there, but you definitely know when it's not there.
Yeah,
Or the opposite way of, you might not recognize when it's not there, but when you bang your shin on a table, you know it's there.
yeah. Ah,
But yeah, the concept of quality, like we're talking about we're talking about stuff that if like we all know what it is, right? We've all felt these things, but actually trying to pin it down is like trying to catch water in a net, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah. For thousands of years, still haven't figured it out.
it's
Or
fine.
or we figured out even in some ways how to talk about it. But this is the thing about the way that can be named is not the way. The trouble is it always comes down to I was gonna say revelation because that's true, but that's a very typically tinted word now. But it's
It's the
the person has to come upon the discovery. You can't
yeah,
you can't teach these more essential or more fundamental or whatever you want to call them
oh no,
substantial ideas. You can't teach them. You can talk about them, but until somebody clicks, till they have their aha moment.
uh-huh. That's exactly right. Yeah, I mean, as a like to put it in 2022 perspective, if you know, you know. Like
Yeah.
it's one of those things. But
However, oh, go on.
but as a no, as a music teacher, it's huge on that. You know,
Yeah. Mhm.
I give private lessons, and I play a brass instrument, right? So everything is most things that I'm doing are happening um invisibly. Like you can't see what I'm doing to produce the kind of sound I make or to change notes, other than physically altering the instrument itself, with the slide or the valves, what have you.
Mhm.
Uh, that obviously has a part to do with changing notes, but your mouth, your lips, your lungs, all like the kind of pressures you're making in your torso, like all invisible stuff. And you can't jump into a student's body, like do it for them and they kind of get it. You kind of have to just lead them, kind of slowly herd them into the right situation, the right environment for them to do it once and go, oh, and that might not happen during the lesson. It might not happen during the time that I'm their teacher. I've had professors like that where I'll be practicing like now, years after I've gone to school, and I'll be working on something and I'll like kind of have a Satori moment, the moment of enlightenment of, I go, oh, that's what Dr. Whatever was talking about.
Mhm. Which I think that's maybe
Years
more
after.
more the
Yeah.
case is like having the knowledge piece like around it makes it so when you stumble upon that moment all those things click together and you go, oh, okay, I can see all this. Because if you stumble on that, you have no reference for it. It's a lot harder to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. No, because then you start to it's easy to fall, like it's easy to misconstrue it. But there's also arguments to be made of like you can also suddenly attach it to a dogma and just assume like, oh, this must be the way,
Mhm.
when that might not be the case. It might be the case, but that's, you know, it's better for you to have the freedom, like how you talk about it. I read all these things and it's not like you don't read, but
But
I
if
read
you
all these
ask me
things
like,
and
have
I'm
you
like,
read? My answer is likely no. If I ask you, have you read? Your answer is likely yes.
right, right, yeah, yeah. Just to sum up our relationship, yeah. Uh, Um, but that's a beautiful thing because I have like all this, like I have a huge bibliography of just stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and you and I think similarly, which is interesting to me because I find, other references and start to synthesize it all and all that stuff. You essentially s- just start, you figure
I'm,
it
s-
out.
I'm self-taught the same like the way a musician has like just struggles through those aha moments with no teacher, no whatever, just play,
Mhm.
play, 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 play.
And
Um,
there are plenty of those, and they're awesome. They're some of the best musicians on the
mhm.
planet.
Yep. So that's
Um,
how I
yeah,
approach philosophy, where it's like I do read because it's interesting to me, but to deal with the problems, I focused on just working them out.
right. Whereas I try to find, okay, how has everyone else talked about these?
Mhm.
And I try to like then piece all that together and I find the common core of all the different viewpoints. Whereas you just kind of, yeah, you map it out, you figure it out.
But
Uh,
the thing that blows my mind is as I started reading, it doesn't matter which of those ways you go, you come to the same conclusion.
yeah, isn't that cool? And I just had a moment of my own of, you ever watch Samurai Champloo?
No.
Oh, fantastic anime. Um, it's based on like the hip hop ideal. Uh, but anyways, there's two characters. Jean and Mugen, who are the two main swordsmen, main characters. And there's a female protagonist as well, but she doesn't matter as much in this context. So Jean is a like classically trained swordsman. He had a dojo. He was the best student there. There's a backstory with him fighting his teacher and all that kind of stuff, but not important to this. But so anyways, he excelled in the structure of learning swordsmanship. And he's like one of the best swordsmen because of his training. Mugen left his village, found a sword, and used his super unconventional methods. He's got like steel-plated sandals that he basically breakdance fights with a sword, like and it's awesome. And it's they're constant. They travel together because it's the kind of the typical anime, like I need to be the one to kill you type of of friendship. And they are constantly at odds and can never beat each other. And you and I are kind of like that in that way of I'm more the Jean type where I have like the materials and the structure and everyone else taught me these things and I just excelled in putting it all together. And you're the Mugen type of like, well, I found a sword, so I'm going to start swinging around. See what happens.
Yeah. 10 out of 10 would not recommend my method.
10 out of 10. I mean, books are expensive, yo.
Yeah, but it's back to the thing. It's dangerous. Philosophy is a dangerous thing. It's much better learned in a structure, which I was, naive is probably a better word than arrogant. I was like, well, if it's a truth, like it has to be good, right? What's the worst that could happen? Discovering the truth.
Yeah, about that.
Yeah.
And it's because part of it is like the truth itself, kind of reining it back into the happiness portion of our segment here. Part of it is that the truth itself may not be a good or a bad thing. The truth is the truth. What might be dangerous about it, the reason philosophy might be so dangerous is because once you know that, like everything else that you run into becomes frustrating because people just are wearing blindfolds all the time, essentially. You feel like you're the one that took the blindfold off and everyone else is still bumping around. Yeah. And no one's listening to you to take theirs off.
Well, and when you first get it, especially if you don't have structure, you're like, you want to pull everyone's blindfolds off, but all you're trying to do is make them unhappy. Like that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Like, I had to learn this terrible thing. I want you to feel it too.
Yep.
How dare you be happy in your ignorance?
Ignorance is indeed bliss. Yes. Man.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because we find ourselves now, and I hate that people talk about, oh, it's unprecedented time in history. It's like, fuck off. Like, no, it's not. No, it's not. Everyone's always been at each other's throats. It's just now we have the technology to show it to ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
But
in fact, yeah, the population was by and large more ignorant of the troubles. That's the only difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely it. And yeah, it's just one of those things of like, throughout history, people have just been at each other's throats and disagreeing and all of this. I've kind of lost my train though. No, it's good.
So ignorance is bliss. People talking about it's unprecedented times, but the reality is,
yeah. No, I'm I'm there with you. I just need to walk through the gate of where I was going.
Imagine it's an example from a previous time.
Probably. We'll get there. We'll talk about something else and I'll suddenly stop you and talk about it.
We can circle it till it happens because, because that's the trouble now, right? Is like everybody, they're not even necessarily getting more truth, but they're less ignorant to the things that are happening.
Yeah. So, okay. I remembered what I was going to say now. Thank you. It's kind of gotten to a point where people are, because you talked about you just want to once your blindfold is off, to follow that metaphor, you just want to rip everyone else's off, not convince them to take it off, but you just want to rip it off.
Yeah.
Different situations. And a lot of folks these days uh, seem to want to just cling to their ignorance. They might feel like something is to be known, right? But they simply don't want to know
Mhm.
because that disturbs the stasis, and stasis is,
Well,
can be a very good thing.
I'd say the modern thing is that with all the information and people being accessible to all these things, people are finding some truth and latching onto it and wanting to be like, I can't believe other people don't see this. And then they're trying to share that one thing. But when somebody tries to expand out to other truths to make it more encompassing, give it more context, they
Mhm.
maintain the blinders, right? So they've seen one and they're fixated on just that one and sharing that one with everyone, which
Sure.
to me, that's the big thing you see at the left and the right is they both have a truth and they're trying to beat each other with their own little truth because neither
Uh-huh.
one of them wants to pull their eyes away from this little thing that they found.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Star Wars does a good job with that. They don't talk about it very much, but people who talk about Star Wars talk about it. Uh, Yoda speaks of, oh, only a Sith deals in absolutes, that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
the Jedi did that a lot more than the Siths.
Yeah. The Jedi Order.
The Jedi Order, yes, not
Yeah.
the Jedi, not each individual Jedi, obviously. Um, but no, the general order, the temple, they were much more like, this is how it is,
Mhm.
which is hilarious. And that was their like downfall, and that's kind of the whole point of their downfall and all that kind of stuff. But it's a lot like that of like, even if you are in the path of the good and the righteous, it's that's a dangerous tightrope
Mhm.
to be on, because that will shift culturally and spiritually, historically.
Well, and you can't make other people happy, right? So to keep it on top of this, people are like, oh, like the world would be better, it'd be happier.
Mhm.
If more people thought this way or lived this way. But it's like, but you can't make people think and live a way. So you can't make them happy. So all you're doing is they're on their track and you're pushing them off it. Like, which, maybe in some of those situations you induce them into a crisis and they learn, but for the most part their natural inclination when you push them off is just to get back on because they weren't trying to get off of it to begin with.
Yeah, no, and that's where, a lot of issues with evangelizing is. That's a hot topic,
Mhm.
you know, uh, Catholic missionaries, Mormon missionaries, all of them, anyone who does all that, uh, trying to convince or even trick people. I'll go that route. And a lot of them try to trick people into it, or convince them, or just kind of ensnare them in that somehow. And some of it is, coming from a general place of caring, like they truly believe that,
You're going to hell
Jesus, yeah,
and
yeah,
they can save
exactly.
you.
It's like, right. And so it some of it might come from a place of love. Historically speaking, it's much more political than that.
Mhm.
So individual, again, just like the Jedi, right? Individuals might have a
but
good,
but it's
like,
a funny thing because it's the the Mormon approach has been a hybrid between the more traditional like mission work, um and then like even with all their weirdness trying to be so upstanding by and large like 'cause that's part of their philosophy is you convert people by showing them how good it is to be a Mormon, not just telling them. Like that's one of the differences is a lot of the other evangelical like efforts are I'm going to tell you why your life is wrong, I'm going to tell you how good it is,
mhm,
because if I'm just trying to show you, you have to happen upon me. And the good word is supposed to be spread. I need to come to you versus let you find me. And then when you find me, be like, how look at how amazing this is. But the Mormons do a pretty good job because it's the only reason they're ridiculed and joked about, but they have a pretty strong footing because a portion of what they try to do evangelically is to focus on themselves as a church and an organization to be something worth looking into, something that
right.
people are like, well, like you can say this about them, but it's the whole they're nice people, right? You hear that about Mormons all the time. It's like, well, weird as can be, but like they're so nice, right? Like,
Yeah, I don't know. And then individually, you hear about ex-Mormons, right? Who
and
some of that is a facade
yeah,
as well.
But
So,
my point is that they think about that, right? Like part of their evangelical work is you can't walk to somebody's door and convince them, right? Like that, you get lucky sometimes, but for the most part, you can't. It's better to make it to show them, even if what you're showing them is fake, but showing them is better.
yeah. Did Buddhists do that as well? I think they did. I don't know the history of Buddhism as well as I should.
General Buddhism is Buddhist sects, like groups of Buddhists, killed each other over the interpretation of Buddha's word.
Isn't that hilarious?
So everybody who tells me Buddhism isn't a religion, it's like it does everything religion does. It has political structures.
Yeah.
It's people.
No.
It's oppressed people because it's like you're not living your life with the right karma. So die and start over.
Right. You know who can fix you?
Yeah.
No, it's kind of funny because Buddha is a title, so there have been many Buddhas.
Yes.
Like the fat Chinese dude is not. That's not Bodhidharma. That's not Siddhartha. Like Siddhartha is the original Buddha. Bodhidharma is, I think, the one who brought it to Japan. That doesn't sound right. Anyways, there are different Buddhas. And I drank a lot of water. I'll be right back. Give me 2 minutes.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna step off for a second too. We'll just cut.
Perfect. Yeah.
After these commercial messages.
Much better. You ever worry? Oh, this is being recorded, but so you and I hang out a lot and we drink a lot of liquids. You ever worry that we're accidentally setting up a Pavlovian response of we have to pee every time we're together?
No.
I don't know if that's a thing, but
No.
well, that can be a thing. You can definitely train someone to have to pee at a certain cue.
No, it's more the drinking.
Yeah. Cheers.
All right, so circling back to the happiness thing specifically, yeah, it's the reason I wanted this to be one of the first ones is because it was my mother was really big on the choose to be happy thing because I struggle with depression and she struggles with nothing, right? She doesn't have any weirdness that comes all from my dad's side,
Sure.
depression and the like weird creative bent and uh grandiose. I do have grandiose daydreams. I'm not grandiose myself because once I come out of the daydreams, I like actually look around and like, okay. And I want to work to the big things, but I don't bring that grandiose back to me when I'm in a healthier mental state. But no, it was one of the things that from a very young age, she talked to me about, and she never meant choose to be happy in the like smiling, like yeah, like that's never what she meant. She meant the more stoic thing of like whatever it is that's going on, like choose to have it be good, right? Like that's more what it is. Like to her, happiness is choosing for the thing to be good, regardless of how it could be perceived. If you just choose for it to be good, then it's good, right? Like that was kind of her logic. It doesn't mean you're happy in the emotional sense, but it means that when you assess your thoughts and that translates back to your emotions, you're telling yourself like, oh, this is a good thing. Like, you can get it without like the loss of a loved one or something like that, where it's like, it might seem weird to be like, oh, it's a good thing they passed. It's like that's not necessarily true, but it's a good thing to, to be able to think about them. It's a good thing to be able to have the quality, right? If we're going to use the quality term, take the quality of their life and then pull it into yours, like make their life mean more by how you respond to that versus just you being upset about it, because that doesn't help anybody. And it's not you doing something in their memory that's going to, uplift their memory or uplift like what they try to do with their life and the way that they affected you. Extreme example, don't know why I picked that one, but
No, it's because it's one of the most common examples you could use. That's perfect.
yeah, and because the choose to be happy or the choose to see the good in it is easy in inconvenience like situations or against clear challenges and obstacles. The trick, and this has been a big thing for me lately, I actually bought little like medallion. Oh, come on, telescopic, you can do it.
Is it the memento memorial thing? Or
No,
memento-
so it's the do not pray for an easy life. Pray for the strength to endure a difficult one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Um,
That's a good one.
but so yeah, it's easy in inconvenient situations, right? To be like, I don't know, you get stuck in traffic, you're gonna be late. It's pretty easy in those situations. Still, your natural reaction is like, oh my god, I'm gonna be late, your anxiety rises up. But it's pretty simple mentally to be like, I just need to like keep myself calm. Like I'm gonna get there when I get there. It doesn't help me to bring the anxiety to work, right? Like it's
Right.
better if I can maintain my calm because if I do, then I can communicate like, hey, I was caught in traffic versus getting there frantically. Then the person you're talking to gets frantic and like it just makes the situation worse. So in like more inconveniences or straightforward challenges, uh, when you can recognize it as a challenge, you can be like, okay, this is a challenge, this is an obstacle. I will, face it. But the reality is everything is a challenge and obstacle. And that's one of the harder things to pick up on. But if you see life that way, um, the concept that a challenge or an obstacle is in any way like hindrance dissipates because you realize everything is a challenge. It's a challenge when you go outside to like feel the sun to really appreciate it, really like enjoy the day, right? That's every little thing is its own challenge. So if every moment is a challenge, well then you can just move from challenge to challenge and just have a good time with it. But not
Right.
necessarily a happy time, like if we're gonna use that. Or you can be happy to face the challenges, right? So that might be the more way to put it is choose to be happy in the face of challenges. Well, the reality is everything is a challenge. It's either a victory or a challenge, and even a victory is just the like loading screen between the next set of challenges.
Right. And so you bring up something that I think about quite often. Um, and you've said it so very well. And what are your thoughts on like life being essentially nothing but challenges?
Mhm.
To just distill it down to that sentence for a second. That sounds exhausting. Like I've thought about it, it just sounds exhausting to me. Like there's no reprieve, there's no rest.
Yeah, wish I was mic'd for that monologue. I'm gonna have to hopefully edit that so it's decent.
Write that down. Write that down. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's in the modern
Right.
world.
So maybe,
That's where it gets tricky.
yeah, and maybe challenge might not be the right word, because language means so much. So
Mhm.
like, because a challenge in English, at least in our culture, denotes it has to be a struggle. It has to be something you have to push through, give more of yourself than there is in order to make it through that challenge. That's what we get because it comes usually challenges come from like our Greek, histories, our Greek stories of like
Yeah,
overcoming great odds. So like the challenge of feeling the sun on your face, right? That's somehow both good and bad at the same
Mhm.
time. Of
yeah,
like, because that's where guilt can come from. Because if you're not appreciating it, you have failed the challenge, and that
yeah.
is when you can like spiral.
I I think there's something to be said. Yeah, so mm,
Because I'm not trying to. I agree with what you said. I just when
yeah,
I
how do
think
you?
of it, I get like, oh god.
Yeah, and like I said, like there's victories. There's clear. So like I'll use one of my favorite examples when you've let your house like get untidy, and you take the time and just fucking get it so that somebody could do a like cribs video in it, and no matter what your place looks like, it's like this is fucking like clean. Everything's in a place.
Right.
Everything's presentation level.
Yeah.
And you take that moment just to like, fuck yeah, like
Yeah.
um, I would put that into victory and like again, like I mentioned with the victory is not a challenge in itself. It's there's with a encompassing enough challenge and an engrossing enough challenge, all the other challenges kind of fade away, which is another part of like the choose what to give a fuck about thing.
Yeah.
When you focus on a challenge, it lets the other ones go away. So they're not all just standing in a line coming at you. You pick one and you like wrestle with it. When you get it down, there's a moment of like, um, But as far as the concept of like rest into that, that's a little tougher. Because like the
Right.
concept of
Unless you consider rest its own challenge, because responsibilities are, challenges, and you do have the responsibility to
rest.
balance. You have to
Yeah.
balance, like you were talking about.
Which, and I
Because
think I think that's a more accurate way to look at it, because if you look at Zen, right? If you look at Buddhism and Taoism, people think of them as like super peaceful, but it's like it wasn't. Like you sat your fucking ass down and you tended your garden. It wasn't a, oh, like I'm gonna do this and feel good. I'm gonna cozy up with a blanket and a coffee. It's
yeah,
like, no,
it
I'm
was
gonna make.
not a hippy dippy follow your bliss type bullshit.
Nope, it
No.
was, you need to take care of this tree because your uh, gambling like mates are going to come over tonight and they see that you didn't trim your tree this week, they'll be shamed, right? But it's meditative. So I think people look too much for because people think of like sitting down to watch TV as resting, and it's not. I think true rest comes all from meditative activities, and it's easier to meditate when you're focused. So it's not,
Mhm.
and there's a different type of resting that happens more to creative people because it's really easy to overdo. But when you like zonk out, um, but that still comes from focus. You like obliterate your focus. You pull it into a thing. You make a big bang for a little bit, and then it
Yeah,
recoalesces.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I would say that it's not like there's, yeah, resting's a challenge. You have to, because it's a responsibility. You have to rest well. Um, because, and that's another thing people don't do. That's back with the chasing happiness thing. They think
yeah,
they're relaxing when they're not doing anything, but then everything kicks back up. Like all the stuff stays there, and they haven't done anything other than just pause it. So they just hold
yeah.
it on pause for a while and then let it go back.
Right. That's
Um,
why like work vacations and things like that are sus because you know because all you're doing is pressing pause on your work
mhm.
for a minute. So it adds its own level of stress. There's that underlying,
Versus the Zen concept, there's like the bonsai trees, the gardens, calligraphy, and then a very ancient one that people don't talk about as much is the uh, in traditional Asian homes, you would basically find like a closet in the house, and it would be decorative.
sure.
And that was
Yeah.
all it was for, it was a decorative space, and you wanted to make sure that it always looked immaculate.
Mhm.
Um, and typically there was plants in there, but to make sure that you stayed on top of it. But then it's the victory thing, right? That's a challenge that's easy, right? It's not challenging to do anything other than just do it. Just water the plants, dust the pictures. But then when you're walking through your house, it's a reminder victory. It's a victory every time you see it. Uh, it's not like a one-off victory where you beat a challenge, then you're on to the next thing because it's a totally different challenge. It's a challenge you choose to do that you constantly get the satisfaction of victory over. Uh,
Yeah.
it's one of those funny things. Like I don't like a lot of the entrepreneurial stuff, but the advice about focus on winning is dangerous. But I think it's a really good piece of advice. Like when you do it on the kind of like Peterson method of like focus on the little victories. You're not trying to win the whole game. Win in a moment, right? Get yourself out of bed when your alarm goes off. Make your bed. Just those little things. Win where you can, and get in the habit of quote winning. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so
And combining that with Manson's give a fuck about only what you choose.
mhm.
Because again, I think about that stuff all the time. I tend to go in the extreme in concepts, uh, which is not good, but also good as a thought experiment. um, so yeah, all the little victories. But the thing is, if you actually take the time to parse out, to list every little activity there is in a morning, you'll never get it. Like from your bed to your coffee maker is going to be a million different things. You can like dissect all of these things, and that becomes just like completely overwhelming. So
Yeah.
you do have to like dull it to a point where there's only a few things, or even if there are that many like millions of things to do, like pick your three and fuck the rest. Like
Well, you have to make it a goal, not a task, right? and sometimes they can be both, right? Like making your bed can be a goal and a task. Making coffee, it's not a victory to put the beans in the pot and then walk away.
Right.
Like,
Right. Right. Absolutely. No, unless that's like the level you need to be at, because depression kind of
yes,
lays you out sometimes. So like, you have to choose reasonable victories, and
yeah.
those
See,
are
but
those are gonna fluctuate.
I would say no, because like that sense of lack of accomplishment, even with just the accomplishment, like putting it in there, you're gonna feel more about what was not done. It's not gonna give you that when you come back home and the bed's made, right? Like you don't get that thing.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So you do have to choose carefully. I think about I read up all the time on the psychology of learning activities and skills and things like that. And essentially, and this does tie into happiness, because we'll talk about we kind of started to talk about mastery and all that stuff, but it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Um, so as it pertains to happiness, but in learning, I've distilled my thoughts these days into it got to be in like there's a green zone where everything is like completely in your wheelhouse and you don't have to think about it really. You can always accomplish it. Yellow zone, where it's difficult, it's doable, but you might fail sometimes. And the red zone, which is you can't do it. You're not there yet. No matter what you do, you're just it's frustrating and painful, and it leaves you, you know, humiliated internally
Mm,
to even try. Uh, we want to be in like that upper yellow zone as much as we can because that's growth. We
mhm.
need to be where we are in a place where we can do it, but we might fail. Like, and obviously you want to skew it so that you can succeed more than fail. Like that's
Right.
true.
Well,
That's true growth.
you basically want to dolphin it, right? Like you don't want your dolphin going to the red to the yellow, because that's how you burn out. You want
Exactly.
green yellow, and you're like just arcing across the top of the yellow. Come back, let yourself win for a bit or accomplish for a bit, and then back up, touch the top, move along.
Right. Right. And you might bump the red once in a while because you got to find the line.
Right,
Otherwise you
yeah.
end up in the green zone without realizing it, and you stay there, and things become boring
hmm
or unsatisfying.
Yeah, I think the to maybe build the metaphor, uh, part of the if you go too much into the red for too long, the yellow section gets bigger on the way down,
Right.
because the as you like burn out, the capacity you have to do the things in the green zone shrinks.
Yep.
So you
Yeah.
got to maintain a health that you have to maintain a healthy green zone to play in the yellow and to not destroy yourself when you clip the red.
Exactly. No, that's exactly it. And there are many factors in that, but that's the general idea of
That's definitely where I failed, ironically, with practicing music when I did like school band or guitar or stuff like that. I was constantly in the yellow pushing the red. I would just burn myself out. I didn't
yeah,
take little things, because all the progress I've ever made with music is when I found a piece and just got really good at an easy piece. Yeah, definitely made that struggle with music. And yeah, I know I just did that in general. Like, unfortunately, it came from my lack of structure in approaching my development. I learned just to do it so much without structure that I was used to playing more in the yellow,
mhm,
which again is why I would not recommend. Like if you can use a structure and take your time and like have mentors and like a tradition of a system, much better, because otherwise you run that risk. Like because
yeah,
everything's yellow to kind of just start with, and you're uninterested in the green stuff because you don't see why it's important. Um, yeah, so
no, yeah, you're right on it. You're right on it. And you mentioned stuff like mentors and all that because you need. I love the phrase "it takes a village to raise a child" because you need other people. You need things around that. And I use that in a very broad sense. I don't mean just literal human beings, people. Like you need so many factors in success,
mhm.
in achieving success, whatever that is, or happiness, or whatever it is. You need more than just yourself. You are not like the be all end all.
Although funny, because when we talk about the happiness thing and the connection to the concept of peace, you do see, especially in the from the 1800s to the 1900s, with all the wander off into the woods, like be a man and like be alone type stuff. Um, the irony, I guess, there is that in their writings, most of those guys talk about the importance of isolation for peace. So importance of isolation for being happy, like truly happy. You need to like step away to like find that.
Mhm.
And they don't talk much about being social or anything like that. But when you read about who they were as people, they were super social when they weren't doing their isolation things.
Yeah.
Um, they had very healthy relationships. They were for the like they were all cantankerous, but for the most part, people liked them because they put forth energy and effort into their social relationships. Um, but they don't talk about it. So if you just read their literature, it seems like the best thing you could do is again fuck off to the woods and ignore the world. But that's
Yeah.
not the whole picture.
No. And again, that because they're bringing up the concept that we just talked about of the responsibility of rest.
Yeah, yeah.
You have a responsibility to gather yourself again
But
before
so
you
the,
disappear.
I think maybe to tie on a new thing to this, being happy. Uh, People like to think that things that are happy. So happiness in the wrong sense. How can we do this? Need a good word that's like con happy and pro happy. Like the negative form of happiness, people associate with being easy, right? Like you do it and you're happy. It's like easy, but it's like real happiness is hard work, which is why people aren't happy, is because you have to work at it. Like,
Right. And yeah, and that brings a whole nother bucket of worms because then the concept of pride comes in, and that's not happiness necessarily. They can be linked. They're linked often, but pride and happiness are two different things.
mm. But I
Uh,
looking at like the modern world, right, where there's lots of people that talk about not being happy and like blah blah blah. A lot of them, what they ask for, they're like, oh, I'd be happy if things were easier, right? Like that's the like postmodernist motto is like, well, I'd be happier if it wasn't so hard to have a house, if it wasn't so hard to have friends, if it wasn't so hard to do this stuff. Like then I'd be happier. If I had an easier time, I would be happier. Um,
yeah.
and I think fundamentally it's like, well, if you were better at it, it would be easier. So there's like that argument, or you can just accept reality that to be happy is work.
No, it's true. And to piggyback on what you're talking about, like the like I'd be happy if situation. Um, there is people may not realize what they're saying when they say that, uh, or at least I'm interpreting it a different way, and I'll tell you my interpretation is uh, is that like if I were to say that, what I would mean is I need a certain level of certainty in my life that will allow me to then to safely explore uncertainty. Because too much
Yes.
certainty is, you know, dystopia. Like that
Mhm.
is a straight up, that is straight up leading to unhappiness in its own way. Not enough certainty is chaos, and that can't be. We don't feel safe. And I use safe in a very broad term. I've been using it this whole conversation. I use it in a very broad term.
Mhm.
We just need to be in a place where we can have the grounding to
A stability.
yeah, yeah, that's really what I mean. That's
Yeah.
really what I'm talking about.
This would be an
Um,
example of where, yeah, like same thing. I'm the same exact way where I do a lot of the, well, when this happens stuff. And I feel crappy about myself every time I do it because it's
yeah,
not, uh, to do one of the new ones. That's not very stoic, like disinterested, like well-read philosopher of you to say you'll be happy when.
sure, sure. No, and but at the
But
same
it's the
time,
stability thing.
it's
It's like I'm not looking for much. I'm just I know I'm in a spot where there's a little less stability. And I just want a little bit more.
mhm,
Um, I don't. I'm
that's
not
because
looking for
that's all we
like
need. Like
yeah.
I'm in a place like to talk about me for a second. Like I have, do you mind? I, but like and I'm not alone in this. You're with me in this. A lot of people are. Stuff like student debt, because you read about these adventures and just oh, I just went and did this thing and I didn't know what was going to happen and all that. It's like, no matter what I want to do, my student debt is not going away
Mm,
unless, unless it does, but I'll see it when I see it.
yeah.
Uh, I'll believe it when I see it. Right now, I don't believe it. Um, so it's that thing of just like, no matter what I do, I'm kind of screwed right now because I'm so deep in the hole with my debt.
Mm,
So like, if my debt were zeroed out, I'd be okay, couch surfing and sleeping in my car, all that kind of rough and, entrepreneurial type stuff.
mm. But you're always just one collection call away from the peace in your own form of chaos being ruined.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no stability really in my
Mhm,
life. It's all smoke and mirrors at the moment. So for me to want to explore the unknown,
mhm.
which is scary, I don't feel it feels irresponsible to do that because
Well,
it's
and
not. Yeah, go ahead.
you know enough about it's the thing you said earlier, right? Where it's like, well, I can't do those things now. It's because of your past decisions. And you know that if you choose to do that now, 10 years down the road, you're gonna pay for it. So it's not like
Mhm.
you just get away with it. It's you're switching the cost.
Yeah,
It's not you're not free to do it, you're free to pay the price later.
that's just it. That's absolutely it. And right now, that is an anchor around my feet.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, and like I bring up my own example, not to be selfish and the whole "woe is me" thing. I don't like doing that.
Yeah.
But I only bring it up because it's a really common example in the U.S. right now for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I can't speak to other countries where economic systems are a bit different and universities are a bit different. But like that's kind of where we are.
Mhm.
Is you know we're not happy because we don't have that balance of stability and instability, that balance of known and unknown.
Yeah.
There's too many unknowns right now for a lot of us.
Yeah, which is it's where kind of part of this project with this podcast and the other stuff we'll be working on goes where uh it's trying to figure out how to in that situation and better still if we can get to people before they get to it, teach them how to build that stability because I've been I still am more of a creative type.
Mhm.
It's just my personality type. But the more time has gone on, the more I realize how much better things would be if I had focused on the stability. Um,
Same.
even if it was like because there was one point where I almost went off to Chicago, and then I was going to just switch from Chicago in Europe and do street performances because I knew I was pretty good at it. Um, but I was basically like, I could just give up on the grandiose type of stuff that I want to like change the world and like be a thing. It's like I could just do art, um, and accept like the student loan debts. Like I might pay it, I might not, it might just cripple me. I just might have to like whatever. Um, but if I didn't have it, like you said, if I didn't have the student loan debt, so my money was my own in that way. Uh,
However little it is, right? As long as it was your own.
yeah,
Yeah.
that every time I made money, I was making money, um, and no one could, no one had a claim on it.
Right.
It would have been probably much more likely, and could have been good, could have been something totally different. But like, yeah, like it would have allowed me a situation where that was more feasible. Um, because had I otherwise done it, like I would have just had to have kind of like kept running. I guess that would have been the catch, right? Is like if I had not addressed the stability, I couldn't ever stop. Um, which is different, right? Because then you're just trading one type of person for another.
Yeah. No, that's really it. It really does come down to balance, like you said, because you can easily focus too hard on just enforcing stability in your life and literally box yourself in
Hmm.
and make it so that you've trapped yourself and can't maneuver. And that's a common affliction of the wealthy, I guess, of the rich, is that they focus so much on getting rich that they're kind of trapped in that process
Hmm.
so that they don't build in the freedom that you're supposed to have with that kind of wealth.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I think kind of the takeaway is that like happiness is more like there's two kinds of happiness. There's, I don't know, synthetic happiness. I think maybe that's the word I'll use. There's organic and synthetic. Synthetic happiness comes from things outside of yourself.
Right.
Um, and organic happiness is the contentment that comes from like a peace. Uh, but the organic happiness, like growing anything, takes work. And it's unfortunate
True.
because
Yeah.
the narrative around happiness is very much these days, I would be happy if things were easier.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever done the thought experiment of what it would feel like to grow like a plant?
Yes. Mm,
It would be, yeah, and I wish more people would. Like my perception, because it's probably not necessarily a pleasurable feeling. It might be pleasurable in its way, but like a constant stretching, a slow,
Well,
constant
see,
stretching.
that's the thing about it is it's the whole thing is uncomfortable. There's never a
Yeah,
point when it's other than breaking out of the seed for the first time. That's orgasmic. Everything from that moment on forward is
is in the yellow zone.
was that?
Everything from that moment on is in the yellow zone.
Yeah, yeah. But it doesn't process that way because your whole point is to grow. So every bit of uncomfortableness is satisfying, right? It's the feeling for, I guess I'll use the gym example because it's the easiest one. Like when you are working out and you get a good pump, it's that the whole thing just feels like a sexy pump all the time, where it's just you're doing the growing, but it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable. It's not like, oh, this is so nice. Like hippies would hate the feeling of being a tree. Like painful sobriety and constant like just soft pain. Uh,
Yeah,
but
no,
if it, but it's the sensation is because that's what you're trying to do. It's very similar to like a workout pump
yeah,
or um, when you're working on a piece, working on a piece, working on a piece, and it's you just figured out how to do it. So it takes all of your focus to do it, but you can. It's
yeah,
that where it's like
yeah,
it's constant work, but every time you're doing it, you're like, fuck yes.
exactly. No, it's exactly right. In the modern era, like gamers are really a part of that too.
Mhm.
They because they're just pushing that level of what they can achieve, especially in something as confining as a video game, where it is, you know, there are laws, there are
Yeah.
laws in that universe
Mhm.
for sure. So how you can achieve that, it's amazing. It's amazing. Um,
But if you try to tell somebody that true happiness comes from being uncomfortable, that sounds counterintuitive to how the word happiness has been used recently. Like the
right,
term,
because the other term, the synthetic term, or just yeah, the happiness people generally think about is how I put it is it's an exercise in masturbation
yeah.
because like
Mhm,
that's you're just doing it because it feels good and doesn't really accomplish anything,
mhm.
but damn is it fun sometimes, like it's just kind of
Yeah,
like
maybe we could do it that where people want to be. See, because I like the word cozy. I was gonna say if you want to be cozy, but there's a aesthetic type of cozy that I refuse to give up for this cause.
no, no, because that does equal happiness and I will die on that hill.
Yeah, yeah, no. But
My
they want to be
size hill.
comfortable. I think what it is they want to be comfortable. And God, why do words have to work this way? It's not being
They want to, there's a word for it, I know there is. They
because
want to have, they want to be able to turn off without consequences. they want
yeah, yeah.
they want to be able to, they want to disengage, they want to be disengaged.
Although they want to be alleviated of responsibility for a time.
Yeah, that's really what we're trying to get at. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they associate happiness or the term happiness has been associated with that time where you forget about your responsibility or you don't have any responsibility.
Right.
Versus the contentment of I mean, they intersect at the when you forget about happiness or forget about your responsibility, but the difference is you're forgetting about your responsibility because you're distracted, or you're forgetting about your responsibility because you're so engrossed in the work that that doesn't even occur to you that you're doing anything uncomfortable because you're just doing it, you're in it.
Right.
So
No, that's it. I mean, The and that's a hugely Zen concept, is just getting engrossed in what you're doing,
Mhm.
really trying to insert the quality into what you're doing.
It's one thing that drives me nuts about new age people, which the new age stuff, it's weird because the new age stuff has become so pop culture that regular people are into it and have no concept that, like, it used to be very clearly like the crystal people were crystal people, but now it's not, right? Like new agery has just bled into regular life for people.
It
Um,
is, yeah. I've had lots of conversations about astrology that I didn't expect to have with
mhm.
lots of people.
My trouble is they're the same type of people that'll talk about like Buddhism and meditation, like, oh, the bliss and the peace. It's like, no, meditation, you should be like intense meditation. The people you're quoting, like, saw it as work. They saw it as
Right.
effort and painful. Like they were happy
You know
to
the
suffer.
story. Do you know the story of Siddhartha's, the Buddha's, like, enlightenment?
I know the abridged version.
Sure. Well, yeah. Either way, he sat under the tree, right, and for however long, whatever they said it was 40 days, 40 nights, that whole deal. Uh, it wasn't that, but for whatever long,
Mhm.
that doesn't matter. And he, like, in his mind or spiritually or on the astral plane, whatever it is, he fought gods, like he fought demons.
Yeah.
Like that was not just like a nice nap and he woke up feeling like everything is sunshine and rainbows all the time. No, no, no.
No, the
He
first
like
step,
yeah,
and the first step before the battling, the first step was to just get his body to shut the fuck up.
yeah, which he tried for a while,
Uh-huh.
a long, yeah,
It's where you get the cheetah, the
yeah,
concept of the cheetah, the monkey mind and the monkey body. First thing you
yes.
need to do is, and this is one of the catches. People are like, "Oh, you just tell the monkey shh." No, what you have to do is during the day, exercise the monkey, and then when you're trying to relax, let the monkey wear itself out until it naps, and then while it's sleeping, that's when you can do your work.
Anyone with a dog or a toddler should know this. Yeah,
Yeah. The thing is, like, you're still one of those things. You're still the monkey body. Your body
yep,
is restless. So is your mind. It's a monkey
yeah.
thing. So you need to work the monkey out, get that tired, and then you can be the person, be the human, as it were.
No, it's true. It's true. And
But I
like,
think that's what they teach in the like the Zen and all that type of stuff. But the New Agers make it all hippy dippy shit.
uh huh. No, it's kind of funny. There's a lot of philosophy around um Odin in the Norse paganism stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, because his whole thing is that he's obsessed with the attainment of knowledge. Like he will sacrifice anything and everything for the to gain more knowledge
Hmm.
uh, for himself, and he does share it, but most of it he keeps to himself. And like his whole thing with Valhalla, right? Like the Valkyries take the slain warriors to his hall where they feast and they fight and they're training constantly and doing all that, all for like it's kind of funny. So the philosophy there is that Odin is gathering as much power as he can. He's letting his monkey mind just constantly run. He's just gathering, 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 all for um, trying to stop or stem or stand up in the face of Ragnarok, which is just the end of things, the end of times. Like,
Hmm.
and the prophecy is already told. Like he knows he is to fail, and yet he still lets his like monkey mind run around and try and like
Hmm.
do all this to try and
Well,
like stem it away.
because it's the glory, right? Like that's the thing. Is it's
Yeah, it is
and
kind of
the
the resignation. That's another part of the philosophy is the resignation of like, well, if I'm gonna go out, we're doing it like with
yeah,
fireworks.
yeah.
Like, yeah. And he died fighting, a giant, monstrous like galaxy wolf. So that's cool.
But see, yeah, what
Yeah.
like what a different concept of heaven, right?
Right.
Like when you live so hard that your reward is to continue living hard.
That's really it. Yeah. And some of it is you either proved yourself or you were already chosen. Like
Hmm.
Odin could choose to kill you essentially. Like the Valkyries were not these like angelic beings that descended upon the slain and carried them away in blissful. No, no, no. The Valkyries were often the ones doing the killing. Odin would like you, stab. Come with me. That's really what they were about. And that's where Wagner comes in, because he depicts the Valkyries as such. They are warrior women who
Mm,
go and choose the slain. Like they're in blood up to their ankles, reveling in the gore. And
mm.
they're just like finding, oh, you like tore that man's head off with your bare hands. That's awesome. Come with me. That was super metal, bro. Come with me.
You know, it'd be really metal if you died.
Right? Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. And you come to the hall, Valhall. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But it does it like the people are like, well, why? The big question then is like, why did Odin do all that if the prophecy is already foretold type stuff?
Mm,
And it's, he chose which fucks to give, I guess is kind of
mm.
the is
Yeah,
kind of
'cause
the like main lesson.
which I guess that's another thing about why I want to do the happiness thing as one of the first episodes is because like it consumes people these days. They don't talk like a lot of people don't say the happiness part, but that's what they're dancing around.
Yeah.
Um, they're not talking about other philosophical concepts. They're really kind of hung up on like, well, I don't really give a shit about anything unless I'm happy. It's like, well, that's a really ineffective way to approach things
Mhm.
because you've positioned yourself to not have it to begin with. Um, and it's even if you wanted to get it in the organic sense, you kind of do that through focusing on the other philosophical tenets. It's the result of the well-lived life. Uh,
Mhm.
but it seems like, yeah, people are like, well, I don't want to do any of that work until I'm happy. Um, that just seems, yeah, it's seems very counterproductive. And I get where it comes
Yeah.
from. Because it's very easy when you're addicted to that cycle of chasing the highs of happiness, to be addicted to it, right? You're like you justify to yourself why you have this addiction. Like, well, I
Yeah.
need it and like I want it and da da da
Yeah.
da da.
And like a lot of people binge happiness,
Mhm.
essentially.
Yep. And I know I still struggle with the mechanics of that, right? Like philosophically, I'm not aligned to it, but I know biologically and behaviorally, I struggle with that kind of binge and cycle sometimes.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
so half on purpose, half out of weakness.
Well, you're not alone. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge, huge, huge thing in our just culture, our biology. It's part of who we are, right?
Which that's
We
the
have the ability to do that.
yeah, that's the on purpose part is I want I, long ago I really admired the like because for 2 years I didn't work much, so I spent most of my time reading, writing, meditating, um, and somehow I wanted to like isolate myself away from the world. I was like, like this isn't it. Um, but then I wanted to bring that Zen, like yogi type of Zen, into the world, and it went very, very poorly, and I was very frustrated with it. It took me a while to realize, well, it's because like you can't bring that type of Zen into the world. You have to go into the world as it is and like bloom the. You have to make the flower burst through the concrete. So
Yeah.
I allow and to some degree force myself to be engaged in things that are possibly I would consider unhealthy or like some of the lesser uh habits of modernity or postmodernity wherever we're at with stuff, but I let myself have to struggle with it because I want to be able to relate to people about where they're at. I don't want to come from the mountain down to the city and be like, you guys are idiots, just throw the phone
Right.
away and you'd be happy. Like,
Right.
no.
There aren't enough mountains.
Yeah.
You know what the problem with the world is today?
Not enough mountains.
Not enough mountains. Oh, no, it's absolutely true. It is because I mean, and it's choices. It's a lot of choices, and that's tough. It is really tough to make good choices and follow through with them. And we want to know that our choices will pay off in a good way, and we simply don't know. a lot of the
Mhm.
times that it's going to work.
Yeah.
Uh, I have a very addictive personality. I can play video games for 16 hours straight. I can eat a whole box of Oreos easily, super easily, uh, too easily. I am like, I can be hypersexual with the right person, like to a point where it's annoying, that
Mhm.
kind of thing, like all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that
And
fixation on something.
right, right. And part of that is definitely undiagnosed ADHD, but I think it's also
See,
like
I
just
don't
a
know. I don't know if that's true because I have the same thing, but it's because I have an addictive personality. Because the addictive personality is the same thing that leads into the truth seeking thing, right? It's that
okay,
like
yeah,
obsessive focus. Like I gotta figure it out. I gotta
yeah,
get to the
no,
end.
yeah, it's true, yes. And then
Like, you-
it's really just about using your powers for good, whatever they
yeah.
are. So, like, I fall for the algorithm of TikTok. They are very smart people over there that, you know,
Mm.
like you're able to scroll and receive information. And if you don't like it, you can disengage by moving on. You can save it for later. It's a very digestible, it's the most digestible thing I've ever come across as far as social
Mm.
media apps.
But see,
And that's on purpose.
when I hear people talk about it, like they talk about either how addictive it is, or when people talk about the content, like people that don't really use TikTok, or oh, it's all this and that. It's like no, TikTok has every kind of content. And then when people talk about how
Mhm.
addictive it is, it's like oh, like you get lost in it. I on purpose built my feed to be boring sometimes because like,
Sure.
which is partly because I'm interested. Like I'll watch the 3 minute videos because they're interesting to me. But what that means is my feed isn't just a bunch of dopamine hits because I worked actively on purpose to make it so it has a bunch of like basically YouTube videos in it. And sometimes I watch them, and sometimes I'll force myself to watch them just to keep the algorithm on it. But so
Yeah.
like it's really easy for me to get bored scrolling. I'll open it up. There won't be any funnies. There won't be anything like witty. And I'll be like, yeah, fuck it. Like I heard a couple
Yeah.
quotes, and then I saw 2 3 minute videos, and I'm like, I don't have time for a 3 minute video, and then I close the app. So you can manage it, um,
Mhm. No, it's true.
but
Or if you can't, you can exercise it productively. I have done a thing that has been very successful the last week. I'm going to see how long it goes. Uh, where I scroll. I use TikTok while I am walking on my treadmill. And 30 minutes goes by like that
yeah,
when you are scrolling TikTok. But now I'm like, being active, hopefully losing some body fat as I do this.
mm,
Um, and it's become like quite nice, you know. And I'm not worried about like if people peak the content I'm seeing. It's TikTok, whatever. It's everything's everywhere.
mm.
Like,
Although gonna put a bow on my thoughts with this, and then I want to circle back to one thing because I think it's gonna be a good segue. Um,
do it.
dang it, I lost the on the phone healthy thing. Oh, my thing my has always been with TikTok, and I don't keep up on this. I have I, but I want to get back into it. My thing with TikTok is if you want to legitimize TikTok use to yourself, you have to post content. You don't have to try to be a content creator, but like if you're gonna be on the app, force yourself to post content. Because then when you're scrolling, what you're doing is you're not only enjoying the content, but you're getting stuff that you will then use creatively. That's my thing. I think everybody who actively uses TikTok should actively make content. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't have to be great. It doesn't have to have any other goal than just to engage in a creative thing as a result of what you're doing. Um, but to tie something around, we were talking about all this like happiness and effort, right? Like that's kind of where we're at. Where it's like there's the happiness that comes from highs, this like synthetic happiness that we like induce on ourselves, and then there's true
Mhm.
happiness or organic happiness, which comes from uh, basically effort. That's really what it comes down to. It comes from the effort in the right places, and what you kind of said just a little bit ago. I think we'll make this the segue. Is that kind of the goal is to find the things that you can put the effort into that end up being good, either for the good or for the greater good, or for the good thing. So I'm thinking maybe what we
Mhm.
do is wrap up like, okay, happiness is effort, but there is also a happiness that's a high. um and there's this concept of like purpose and the good. Let's make the next one. Well, okay, well, what is the good?
Oh, a nice, easy little segue.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Nice and simple. What is good?
Well,
Ooh,
we just tackled the happiness, and I think we did a decent job of like making it not so nebulous with
true.
with
Yes.
with a practical way you can approach it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. There are
Good.
parts where I feel as though I say a lot. I say nothing in a lot of words, but
Yeah,
it's,
that's that's why we decided that an hour was not long enough for us to do these things.
right, right. But and it's frustrating, like for listeners to hear that. Like it's like okay, he just kind of talked in circles for a while and didn't really come to anything. But uh, it's really important to come up with the excuse that that's part of the process. Like that's absolutely necessary. Like
Well,
if
yeah,
it was just
this
yeah,
is not a podcast of you and I being like, look, we thought through the things already, and we're going to tell you the answers. The term metamepius is working through thought.
yeah,
We're working through the ideas on this. This is
yeah,
not a thing where we come to the episodes with answers. We come to the table with a bunch of questions, and then we play with them until answers start popping up.
right, right. Oftentimes more questions pop up. That's really annoying, but also beautiful.
But that's why the project continues.
Yes, yes. Job security.
All right,
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Excellent.
sweet. All right, so unless something changes, next will be on to the good.